about all this stuff. Like I had to go through. So I joined YouTube in, man, I want to say like 2007, 2008, like right after I started doing stand up. And
Mm,
we used to just take like a small digital camera and like record ourselves on the road in like truck stops and random stuff.
right.
And we would just upload everything. It was like a diarrhea of content, and a lot of it is like so cringy and embarrassing, and most of those videos on my page are hidden. But like
Ah,
I had subscribers and other content on there that I wanted to keep, so I had to like migrate everything over to a new YouTube channel. And it's not a very easy process, and it's changed. So like I first looked at doing it about a year ago, and then the process has changed since I looked at it before. And so I spent like the last week and a half getting it all right. And the other thing is when you migrate like that, there's actually like a 7-day cool off period because I don't know, they just want to make sure that it's not like a fraudulent thing where somebody else is basically stealing your YouTube
taking
channel.
stuff.
So
Yeah. The
yeah,
great migration of Josh Denny.
right, exactly. But I just remember going back through and looking at all of these different all these different sort of videos and stuff. And I shared one today that was from the bar that I used to do comedy at all the time when I first started. And I'm just looking back at like the video quality and stuff and seeing how sort of like raw and terrible it was. Like I even if you look at my Instagram, I posted a picture from the fourth time I ever did stand up, and it looks like a Bigfoot photo. It's all blurry and I'm like halfway moving, and it looks like just like, is this a comedian in the wild? It's just ridiculous.
Well, we got one, a real live comedian in Los Angeles. It's
Yeah.
crazy, it's real. And his name is Josh Denny.
Exactly. There you go. So Laura, is it Rochelle? Am I saying it right?
You said it right.
Yeah,
Good
welcome
on
to
you.
yes, welcome to the darkest hour. I found you. This sounds so creepy. I found you. No, I think we ended up following each other when 100 Humans came out on Netflix, and I was going through, and I think I made a post joking about something. And then generally when you do that and you hashtag, it will bring up like the profiles of other people that are talking about the show. And then I just went in and started finding the humans and was like, oh, this is this person from this thing and this person from this thing. And I ended
Oh,
up
okay,
following
right.
you I think I ended up following you from that. And then
Oh, okay.
like, as you see on social media, like people post stuff you like or you're into, you go, oh, I agree with that. And
Yeah,
so you and I sort of became
yeah,
friends through Instagram that way.
yeah. That's actually, I mean, that's the interesting time to our culture and the good thing about it and the way it can connect and bring about opportunities and communication and good communication, which feels kind of not capable to do sometimes via social media as people think. But surprisingly, you found yourself filtered through that. And I
Right,
feel like we have
exactly.
some good communication.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
And one of the things, I guess one of the things that I initially thought, like watching that show, is like, boy, this had to be a crazy experience for anybody that participated in it. And I think I
Yeah.
asked you that right on, like, what was that like? And I think your first response was that there was so much more that the camera that people just will never see, because you guys were there for like a week, right?
Right. It was 2 weeks. It was two
Wow.
weeks of filming. Yeah. Yeah. And it was like almost 12-hour days. Um, and you had 2 days off. And even one of those days I didn't have off because I was an idiot who chose to volunteer to be tortured. So that meant I didn't get a day off, and I had to go to some house and take a 500 question test and pass it, and a psychological review in person with a psychologist. So some interesting things for sure.
Yeah, that's so funny, because I remember watching that thing and being like, I can only imagine the amount of legal paperwork that everyone that did this part had to go through to be able to participate in that experiment.
They have my firstborn child for sure. I know it's funny because I who even reads that stuff is I mean, my dad actually is a great writer in ways. I think he does like legal jargon, type, like writes contracts in some
Yeah,
way. And
some
he's not
legal
like a
copy.
lawyer, but and so I'm like, I should probably be better at. And now you realize, in the pursuit of anything in entertainment, you really should read every part of things, because people who were on that show, um, they weren't supposed to be on anything for at least another year after it had aired, and it didn't air for two
Really?
years after filming. So 2 years, yeah.
So there were
So
some
everyone's like,
people.
"What?" And I'm like, "My hair is totally different."
Yeah. Well, the thing that is always funny about those kinds of shows to me is that, like, when you get the casting notices and stuff, they're like, we don't want any actors or any comedians and it's like, yeah, but who's getting a casting notification? Like, all of these people are actors and comedians and musicians, right?
Okay, so this is a great thing. I don't know. Again, where I say the legal side, where I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel like I can get in trouble anymore. But then again, it's still fresh on Netflix. But this would interest people, I bet, is that was my thought. The insider to this 100 Humans show that is nothing as it seems, or is it? But that was a big laugh for me too, because you'll see people I know very well, and it says their name and like their profession, and it's like, is that really their profession? Are they really an electrician, or
Right.
they may be trying to be an actor and happen to get a casting notice, and maybe they did. They're an electrician on the side. Most of us have different hustles that we're doing in order to go about this life. But
Right.
it's very funny because now I found myself as an adult for 2 weeks at like a summer camp for weirdos, because we were all just these thespians and all ages and different backgrounds. But it really did feel like kind of my people finally, where I was like, holy shit, I've this is like high school experience I wanted, but way worse and way
Well,
better.
yeah, that's the thing that I thought was really cool about it, was this idea. Well, I guess cool in one sense, and then I'm sure in another sense, kind of poisons the well, because you're like, this is all these diverse people with all these different backgrounds and all these different things that they do.
Right.
But in a way, they're all people that would somehow get a casting for a show like this. So there's this common thread that everybody has that almost no one can really talk about on the show, because it would break the fourth wall and it would kind of like
Yes.
ruin the idea of the experiment, right?
Well, yeah, it's a very scientific show with random samples. And I mean, it was wild times where you would be there for maybe 5 hours waiting around in a room with, it was like prison in some forms. You're just with your uniforms. Everyone had the same thing. I was number 65, right? And you just sit there and you bond. You're left with just yourselves, right? You have no cell phones, you have nothing. And you're just with these people who are from different backgrounds, even if they're all on a somewhat similar path or pursuit. We had chiropractors and singers, and so still a very good range. But I'm not having a doctor next to me necessarily on 5 doctors to 5 trash men to the background of jobs wasn't exactly probably represented, but personalities did absolutely range, and that caused for, to me, some better TV that they didn't show, of drama and people who dated each other, people who
Oh,
probably
I'm
got
sure that
divorces
happened.
after. Yeah, I mean,
I'm
you
sure that
put six
happened.
people in a room together for many hours. You have nothing but to get along or not, and there's some interesting stories for sure.
Well, and the thing that people don't really always understand about TV shows like that one is, um, like, what actually is caught on camera, like during the filming process, and everyone in that room could look around each other and be like, that was the funniest shit ever, or that was the cringiest shit ever,
Oh yeah,
and you'll be like,
yeah,
you'll be like, that's definitely the thing that they're going to want to put in the show. And then you see the final edit and it's not in there, because the person editing the show was never there, or never never part of uh the whole thing. So like, they have a different idea of what the best stuff is, or they have a different idea of what's funny or what's entertaining or interesting. And so you guys could have left, and I'm granted, I'm speaking for you, but you could have left there thinking like, oh, these three people are going to be like the stars of the show. and then you see the final thing and you're like, who the fuck are these people?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm one of it. Like people said, the Lord, and so I had so many humans reaching out to me saying, I don't know why you're not on it more, and
Yeah.
why, and I kind of laughed, and luckily I don't put a lot of expectational energy on like anything. And this torture I was only two, there was only two females represent 5 people out of the 100 for this torture part, and that seems like great TV. But I think even then, I joked, I make a joke to myself really, and be like, I must be not what they wanted, because I wasn't a baby back bitch during the torture experiment. Let's be honest, I was pretty much myself. That's not great TV.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't really
Like,
want to
if you
show
want good
anybody
TV, I
handling.
could have been an actor, but I was myself.
Right. Well, and of course, like for what they want to show, they don't want to
Yeah,
see
and
somebody handling it well. That's not the show.
it's not the show, and the show took away a lot of the humans and brought in a lot of different professionals, and they were probably professionals, but I know a lot of the humans. There was, just exactly as you said, so many beautiful, funny moments, and it could have been the funniest show, I think, on Netflix in many forms. Because if you had just had hidden cameras, I mean, all around, because you put people together. I mean, it was exhausting days, hilarious days, people crying. I mean,
Oh yeah,
I even had a point, like, one.
we'll get to my favorite crying moment in a second. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I'm like, oh, I've got it bookmarked. I've got the note bookmarked of my favorite meltdown on the show.
And it's probably not even the good one. That was actually, yeah, I don't even think they showed the best meltdown that was on TV. And it was, I don't even think they showed this experiment, because they realized they probably had to cut so many things, because people would have been like, how dare they put those humans through that? And so no one even knows we did this experiment.
That it was even
That was
worse.
pretty fucked up. It was worse. It was rating people on their looks, and this girl had a meltdown.
Oh
I'm not
yeah.
laughing because it's awful, but there's a lot. Yeah.
Hey, listen, this is the darkest hour. You have to laugh when it's awful on this show.
It's true. I mean, survive it. If I didn't use humor throughout that entire show, there's that part in that torture experiment. They're like, see, she's losing her mind. She's laughing. And everyone wrote me like, you must be losing your mind all the time, because I use humor for everything. And I'm like, well, of course I would use it, especially during your version of torture.
Which one? So aside from the torture, the torture episode, which of the experiments was the most trying for you to go through? Like, which one was like the most exhaustive, or the most crazy?
Well, exhaustive was the torture, because they kept me awake. I was already on a 12-hour day, and then it was sleep deprivation. And so another 12 hours on a steel chair, and I was exhausted. But an uncomfortable one was like, we were allowed to volunteer to like hold our pee.
I remember that.
Yeah, and of course I'm not on that either, because all of us, like a certain group of us, did it that entire time, and then they ran out of time, so they only randomly get a couple people, and so all these other people held their pee, are like, we did it for nothing,
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. Like, we're around the lunch table punching each other in the stomach, like, like it was hilarious, but also pretty uncomfortable to hold your pee. Let me think, because there must be. I mean, what's weird is the unintentional experiment was probably the worst, and that was just the whole thing, which was taking a person, stripping of their clothing, putting them in, and throughout a day, all they become is a number. And that's a psychological aspect I underestimated, to just these shufflers of you. You're just treated as scum. And I'm careful to say this, but it is the closest on this earth I'll come to a Holocaust experience.
Mm-hmm.
Because when can you actually get that experience? I'm not trying to look for it, I can go to China, I guess now, but
well, if you talk to certain people, we're on the verge of one here in the United States. At least that's what some people
right.
say.
And we wonder what civil war is coming and all those things. But
Yeah.
to be strict of, to be known as a number, shuffled in rooms, and then called out by a number, and you'll be playing cards and be like 42, 35. And you're like, oh shit. You're just waiting to see if your number gets called,
Yeah.
or if your friend you're playing dominoes with gets called, and then they do, and you're like, no. We
Yeah.
didn't care about the TV show anymore. None of us did. Most of us just wanted to make it through the day, get our pay, and enjoy each other.
Yeah.
And we all bonded on some really crazy levels that on those 2 days we had off, I said one of those days didn't have off. On that other day, we all got together at someone's pool thing. And
Oh,
so,
yeah,
like, we're together every day together, and you think we'd...
Yeah, I think there were pictures
probably,
of that
like,
on,
where
like,
we were just still that
yeah.
inseparable.
Yeah, that's it. It's got
Mhm,
I think the way you described it as like a summer camp for weirdos is probably that would have been a better, I think, tagline
Absolutely.
for the show than even what they use,
Absolutely.
because as you watch the
Yeah.
episodes, and then especially as you start to see people interact on social media, you realize like, oh, these people are like, it became sort of a clubhouse atmosphere, not just a bunch of like strangers trying to avoid each other in a room for 12 hours a day.
Oh no, you wouldn't be able to. You wouldn't be able to. The biggest introvert was exposed.
Yeah. My absolute favorite moment on the show, and I think I joked back and forth with you on Instagram about this, was the shooting segment.
I
And
knew you were waiting for that meltdown.
I literally go back, I'm not even kidding, like probably like 3 or 4 days ago, I was flipping through Netflix and I saw the advertisement for 100 Humans again, and I was like, oh, I gotta go watch that scene. And if people don't know what I'm talking about, you gotta go. I think it's like episode 5, I don't remember, but there's an episode where they're testing racial bias, and they have essentially like a shooting gallery, and they have people, they think they're testing reaction time or something like that, and they're shooting at different people, but what they're actually being tested on is their racial bias over who they shoot.
Yep.
Some people are holding cell phones, some people are holding guns. Now, first of all, I would have immediately realized, like, oh, they're testing us to see if we shoot black people. I would have immediately picked up on that. But the funny thing is not only how many people didn't pick up on it, but them realizing it in the middle of the exercise. And there's the main girl that they highlight at the end of the exercise, literally just starts shooting people of color, and she starts like crying every time she does it. And it's like, to watch it now with all of the police brutality stuff that's happened in the last 90 days and all of the protests and everything else, it's like, to me, it was such a hilarious thing to see a white person like realizing like, oh no, I'm racist.
I'm
racist.
Yeah, I mean, oh no, I'm racist. What's funny is it was like my dream come true as someone getting walked into that scenario.
Yes.
Because my background's criminal justice, and I've done some shooting. I'm not racist. You all feel, except everyone's telling you are nowadays, and you're like,
right.
fuck, I didn't know I was. I thought I was. I loved all races, but apparently I'm an asshole for not putting out a black thing. But yeah, I mean, on the show, they hook you up. They put you through a gun simulation test before that, which was a crazy moment they can't show on TV, which I have to say, this blur. They're like mentally not together human on that show. There was a couple, right? But this one was like, she was mentally not all there. She was even the one who, like, I had like my big mama come up to me after a bus ride. She goes, I want to let you know, I'm not going to say her name, talking shit about you on the bus, and that's not okay to us. And it's like high school moments, like these three, they come up and they're like, it's not okay, and I'm like, man, and this girl though, she just, I think mentally, and it took a strong constitution, I think, to spend all that time and go through those things. And yet here she was in the gun simulation, and we're all nervous, like, these are fake guns, right? Like, I don't know, like, obviously, but they're movie guns. And there's some Navy SEAL guy going through us gun safety, and that Navy SEAL dude, like, this is how you handle it, even though it's not real, it fires off blanks, movie blanks, whatever. And she raises her and goes, what do you do if you point it at your head and pull the trigger in front of like everyone? And we're all like,
It's funny that
Shit.
you say that, because I joke that if I were in that, I would be like, you guys aren't getting me with the racist shit. I would have turned the gun on myself and been like, I just beat the simulation. So she might have been thinking the
Like
same
the
exact thing I
Matrix.
was. Yeah,
I don't know. You know,
exactly.
she was like, she didn't get to do the experiment. She got kicked off the show later. She also slapped a gay guy in the face, and they
Oh,
called it
okay.
like one of our
Which
gay
experiment was?
humans.
Yeah, which experiment was that?
Exactly.
Well, there's
Well, he's a
certain.
man, trying to be
Yeah,
gay, but I think he took it as a way that because he was gay, she, you know, who freaking knows? I'm telling you, the TV could have been much better. But the simulation, you know, they attach you to all this tech and tell you you're gonna have the GoPro here and the helmet. And I remember I was in Sarah's line, that girl who reacted. I was
yeah,
right there with her, right next to her, trying to help her after she had her panic attack. I happened to be right there next to a lot of them and their panic attacks. And another girl with that, you know, rating people on their looks. That was that really good panic attack situation. But
well,
the gun
it had to
one,
be a little different for you, having a background in criminal justice and knowing your way around guns, where you're like, yeah, this ain't no thing. And then there are other people who have never even seen a gun in real life, and they're
yes,
probably
and
just
yep,
shitting their pants.
shitting their pants. And Sarah was one of them. And before the experiment, we had to really talk. And people were like, the tech, when people were like, "Are you good to go in?" She's like, and I'm like, you know, you can say no anytime. Or I think she had a sensitivity over a past shooting at her school, so no one knows what everyone's bias is going into these situations. And then we're blind to knowing the situation. We walk in, it's a dark room. There's all these things like Men in Black, you know, that fucking simulation where
Right.
it's like the aliens get to pop out. And I'm excited now. So I'm like, hell yeah, I get to like shoot aliens like Men in Black.
Yeah.
Emphasis on black. I didn't realize they're gonna make it a
Right, exactly. They're like, Boyer, they're like, does she know? You make a joke about Men in Black. They're like, does she know that? Does
does
she
she
know that
know they're
that's what it
they're
is? Yeah,
setting
that's
her up for her
yeah,
racial bias. And the reason that I was that out of all the experiments was the one I was most curious how they were going to edit it, because there was people. Let me tell you, it wasn't fucking easy. They had anyone who jumped up does this or this. That was the
yeah,
difference of your eyesight. So, you know, they're trying to pin that we're all racist, but in other ways, it's like we're all scared and see this movement.
right.
So the
Well, and they're
move
holding their phones like a gun, you
like a
know?
gun.
Yeah, and it's like nobody holds their phone with two hands out like this, you know? So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah,
And
I get.
no one was looking at the person's face, which is the big one they wanted to present. Is we've known JP, the guy who you shot, who's black. You've known him. He's been around set this whole time. He even
Yeah.
said hi to you today, and you shot him. And I'm like, that's because it looks like a gun. I don't, you know.
Yeah.
But there's people who got perfect scores. Like my friend Brandon got a perfect score. Was his edit on that? Nope.
No, of course not. They're not going to show gun savvy people, and they're not going to show, again, the problem with a thing like that is that there's an intention. Now, I would have picked up on the intention right away, and I would have, because that's how my brain works. In every scenario, I
Yeah.
go like, what's the most
Yeah.
racist part of what we're experiencing right now? I would have picked up on it right
Well,
away.
now you do that because
No,
you've been through on some form. No,
I've
okay,
always done it. It's a pastime of mine. I am one of those people, and this is kind of what gets me in trouble as a comedian, is like anytime something remotely racist is happening around me, I'm always the first person to notice it. I'm like the canary in
okay,
the coal mine. And some of it I think is just like growing up and having a mother in an interracial relationship in the early 90s, when
yeah,
people were much more open about their racism in public. So I think you just sort of develop a sixth sense to spot it and to see it, and then and then it just comes with you through your entire life, where every time that kind of thing is happening, if you're being stared at somewhere, if you're with a significant other, or you're dating a girl who's not the same race as you, you just your head is always kind of like on a swivel, where you
mm,
recognize that. And even like as a comedian, when I first started out, I would tour with black comics. I would tour with my buddy Chris Shaw, who was a headliner, and I would open for him. And then when I became a headliner, my buddy Kevin Kraft came out and would open for me, and both black comics. And we would be, going through like North Dakota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and people wouldn't necessarily be outwardly racist like in the South or whatever. or some of those horror stories you hear, but you would definitely feel it. Like you'd be sitting somewhere and you would just feel the eyes, or you would feel people whispering at their tables or whatever. So I would walk into a scenario like that, and the minute two different color people popped out, I would be like, oh, this is the test. Okay. But then again, I would have,
That's
then I
an
would have,
interesting as well. Yeah.
yeah, and then I would have started making jokes, and nothing I said would have ever made it on the air. So I think
And
it's,
that I love that. I love that you say that, because I think that is something worth discussing more. Where, you know, people aren't intentionally sometimes, or whatever it may be. I had one of my closest guy friends became in college and into LA, and he's black. And you know, and I remember taking him like to a car shop, just to have a guy. It wasn't because he was black. It's like, I'm you know, treated as different at a car shop. They might take advantage of me because I'm a female and don't know my shit around a vehicle. Let me
right,
just bring
right.
a male presence just to be here. But then I didn't realize the cherry was a black male presence. And you just understand, like, the intrigue of like the difference of cultures all around. It's all around the world. It's not just America, people.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah. If you've
Like,
traveled,
I
and
just
by
want
the
to get
way, it's,
that through.
yeah, it's so much. And anybody who's traveled, it's like, I've my travel is actually very limited internationally. I've only really been to Canada and Mexico, but, you know, I have a lot of friends that's their thing. They travel, they're around the world and everything. And everyone you talk
Yeah.
to is like, dude, we're probably still the best when it comes to like racism and homophobia, because there are so many other places you go where it's like, it's like what I
Yeah.
talked about in the 90s, where people are just openly racist, openly homophobic, as if it's not even
Yeah.
a thing. And a lot of people that
Yeah.
think, like, you'll hear people make comments like America's the most racist it's ever been. It's like, are you fucking retarded? Like,
You're
obviously,
retarded.
yeah. I mean, it's nuts to think that. And again, if you think that, you probably haven't traveled many places in the US. You definitely haven't traveled around the globe.
Outside.
Yeah,
I
because
would
it's
think that's
way
a great
worse.
question to ask people. Not what is your degree, but how much you traveled. I think that was a quote from like Edison or something. Don't quote me on that quote,
Yeah.
but it's something where it was like,
Just go right
it
in.
was like, you know, don't tell me how educated you are. Tell me how much you've traveled. And I know that could be a privilege, right, to be able to travel. But is it? You can work your ass. It is with the Mexicans I worked with in the back of the house in the kitchen, and that was something for me to realize. Oh, I hate you.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm like, isn't Thomas Edison a racist now too, or something? I don't know. So that's where you're like, oh
Well,
shit.
if he has a
Um,
statue, it's coming down. I think if you have a statue and you met a black person before 1900, that shit's coming down.
I was in Gettysburg, you know, a week ago. It was pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, I think
That was
yeah, I think you were telling me you
yeah.
were planning a trip there.
I mean, I have family back east and everything, so there's some interesting discussions. I had a lot of fun just interviewing locals. I got to talk to a real Confederate and try to understand his perspective, to the motorcycle gang who came to protect and help the police. To It's just really interesting times. And you know, it was wild to go there and be on a field of so many people who've died, both black and white, and also people's agendas. And I think all of us have been a bit miseducated on so many platforms. Where do we start? But that's even an interesting education to actually get to know on what is the Union versus Confederate really agenda or idea. It's really interesting,
Yeah,
because we
it's
all
funny.
think it's slavery, and it's actually not.
Well, it's funny, and by the way, like, you know, we live in a society now where if you even bring up those points as a person who's not black, you're immediately labeled racist. But I growing up, so I grew up just outside Philadelphia, and I kind of bounced back and forth as a kid between Delaware and the suburbs of Philadelphia. So there's about an hour long stretch across Highway 95 there, that I lived somewhere along that stretch my entire youth growing up. So all of our field trips were like Gettysburg and DC, and so we had a lot of those
Okay.
sort of historical field trips as a kid, and so I was always kind of interested in that. And I remember hearing them tell stories about, you know, oh well, there were black people that fought in the Civil War as well, and then you were like, Oh, well, that's interesting. And then I remember we had this one like wiling out ahead of his time, probably like a conspiracy type of dude who was a tour guide. And he was like, and some black people fought for the South. And I was like, wait a minute, what? And I remember our teachers being like, no, that didn't happen. That's not real. And then, so I remember I got interested in kind of like researching that stuff probably
Yes.
later. I remember recovering that material later in high school when I moved to Minnesota and being like, wait a minute, didn't this dude say that black people fought for the South? And then I started looking that up and realized that there, like you said, there's this whole side to the Civil War that never gets talked about, which is that essentially a big part of the morality that the moral push to end slavery also had a secondary agenda. And in some cases, depending on who you were at that time, that was your primary agenda, was to bankrupt the American economy and force us back into
Right.
debt with the Bank of England. And so a lot of the people in the North that are in this, so like the funny thing about the Civil War statues coming down is that people go like, these are racist, treasonous statues, we have to take them down. And it's like, yeah, but so are also some of the people in the North that you celebrate about ending slavery, because they were actually trying to help England take us back over. They weren't actually trying to free black people either. There was a different agenda, and we like to look back on the good thing
Right.
that came out of the Civil War, but you don't realize that the motivations to free the slaves were as corrupt and just on a different with a different agenda than the people who were trying to keep them. And so in a lot of
Yes.
ways, it's like
Right.
the unfortunate reality of that time is that slavery was the economy, but it was also the way that America was able to be competitive in the world marketplace and to be independent economically. And the people that wanted to end it weren't these like righteous white people. They were people that were like, oh, if we bankrupt the American economy, now we'll have to go back into debt with the Bank of England, and England will retake over the colonies. And that was the agenda. And so when you start to read about some of
Weird.
those
Money is
things,
the agenda.
yeah, exactly. Oh my God, it had to do
Who
with
would ever
money and
think?
not humanity, of course.
Not altruism.
And then you start to realize, like, oh
Right.
yeah,
And
so
how
and
do
there
people
were
not see that a bit right now to me?
certainly, yeah. I mean, when you look at things like BLM, and this is the cool thing about the internet is like now people are waking up to this stuff a little bit and they're going out and they're researching, and you'll see like Instagram live videos or Facebook live videos where people are showing you on a screen recording, hey, if you click like enough links, you can actually see where your donation to Black Lives Matter ends up. And there was this guy who was like literally clicking through and looking at all these things and being like, oh, look, it somehow ended up in the Clinton Foundation. It's like, Jesus Christ.
Biden went from how much for his campaign to how much during
Oh,
this
yeah.
time. I mean, like, I'm not saying it's a bad movement, but that is the interesting part is don't be, you have a beautiful heart and a beautiful agenda, possibly, but what's the agenda of the people above you and the agenda of that and that? And it's like, you take 10 minutes and you follow a trail. And unfortunately, people maybe who have dealt with harder betrayals in life are the ones who start to filter through those things faster. And
Mm-hmm.
people who haven't had as much maybe shit things happen to them in their lives, I don't know. It's that hard. But for me, I don't know. Like you said, you growing up the way you did now see the racial line on a certain spectrum because of your mom in an interracial relationship in
Mm-hmm.
the years that they were in it, which was a different time. And we all are the summation of, our past, but as well as our nature, nurture, and free will. I believe we're compromised with these three things, and people are just. It's a weird time, and I don't want to. I don't like to. You wonder what we're questioning, well, and what we're searching into, and sometimes I think there's a great agenda and a great matter. Black Lives Matters makes sense, but why is it such a separatist movement, and what's the agenda possibly behind it? And it could be, to me, a bigger thing going on than just equality and the beauty of what we want to bring from it.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
like, where's the money? What's happening?
exactly. I mean, the follow the money is probably the only thing that will remain true throughout all of society and history. Is if you follow the money, you'll find the real
Yeah.
motivation and the real intention. And like I remember
Yeah.
through my pursuit of like being interested in this stuff and looking at it and discovering about people like William Ellison, who was one of the largest contributors to the Confederacy out of South Carolina, who was a black slave owner. Literally a dude who apprenticed under the guy who invented the cotton gin, and then
Mm.
when he died, he left him his plantation. And the comedian mind in me is always like, could you imagine that day when you're like, oh my god, they left Aubrey, which I think was his slave name was Aubrey. They're like, they left Aubrey the plantation. We're all free. And he was like, not so fast, motherfuckers. The shit's just getting started. It's just like, to me, it had to be that moment on that plantation. And it was like one of the larger plantations in South Carolina.
Wow.
That had to be that moment when like, it's kind of like when Obama became president, where people are like, shit's gonna change now, and then
They
like
don't change for us, and then Obama put them more in the shitter.
yeah, exactly. Like 8 years later, everybody's like, wait a minute, we had a black president. I didn't feel like we had a black president. It felt like we had
It didn't
another.
really seem like he did a lot for this area that was really impoverished in black culture and segregation. But
right,
okay.
exactly.
Yeah,
So to me, that was like, he was like in my mind, he was the first Obama where people are like, oh, finally a black plantation owner. And then it was like, he's like, nah, I'm more cruel and evil and mean, motherfucker. I'm giving all this money to Confederacy to keep you pieces of shit on this land. It's like, oh my god, how has that not been made a movie? I mean, to me, that is
I
like
guess
the most.
You bring me to like one basic movie, which is Knives Out, which was pretty fucking good because he gave it to his like nurse who was from an immigrant country, and the whole white family. I don't know, and I'm like, that's nothing as good as what you're saying.
Oh
and,
yeah.
And
also,
I just listened to Chadwick Boseman on a podcast. Go. I like you.
Oh no, I was gonna say also, what kind of Willy Wonka pimp magic do you have to go from like slave to slave master and just be like, yeah, nothing's changed, just with the penny flute, just get back to work. It's like just other people are like, wait a minute, I didn't know there were promotions. There's promotions here. I didn't know you could get promoted. I've been fucking around on the job. I didn't know one of us was gonna run this place.
And then and then if he goes, funny on you white people, and then he starts to, because there's indentured servants. People don't realize white people have been slaves since the beginning of time too. So,
well, my people, the Irish especially, like,
Irish especially, my people too. I'm not as red as you, but
yeah, Neil
you're
Brennan,
an Irish American. Start saying it.
Yeah, Neil Brennan had a great joke. Well, it's in one of his specials. The guy who co-created Chappelle's Show, and he talks about the sketch he wishes they could have done, which was white people on the last day of slavery. And it's basically like white people freeing the slaves and being like, "Listen, you guys did a lot of great work over the last few years. Please don't murder us." And so if you could gather your things, the Mexicans will be here any day now. Which is a hilarious joke, but it's more relevant to this time. But the more accurate historical piece,
and more relevant.
Yeah, but the historical piece is that when slavery ended, the Irish became the new slaves, essentially, because they were dirt poor. They came over just before the end of the Civil War during the famine, and so they were literally like the lowest again. And it's all about the slavery was really, and this sounds like such a downplay of it, but it was really the first mass migration of any group of people to the U.S. And if you look throughout history, every group that essentially ultimately emigrated to the U.S. became the bottom of the labor pool, essentially. So like the Irish, the Irish came, and then they became the bottom of the labor pool, and then the Chinese became the bottom of the labor pool, and now Mexicans, right?
Mexicans,
yeah.
And I absolutely so. I don't know what I'm able to say sometimes, but that's a reality I was faced with during Corona. I came back. I had an opportunity to be with someone with a camera and go to the strawberry fields in California and watch with the camera for this little article from New York, Mexicans working out there. And a big part of it was for one particular woman who wanted to come out saying she doesn't feel safe being in these conditions and not being protected. And it was wild because I felt like I was watching a plantation. I mean, they were just
Yeah.
working and hustling. And then I have video footage of this shit. And I'm like, what to do with all this meat? But because it's a different article they're, of course, putting out than what I was witnessing and seeing. And a big crazy thing to me, too, is just what you said about the black slave owner was also the same kind of interesting thing. There was this just big Mexican man with his arms behind his back watching them all in the field. And, you know, what promotion did he get? And crazy thought is like talk matters. And then I'm like, you're eating strawberries. I just love you to understand where your strawberries are coming from.
Right.
And your fruit and vegetables.
Well, and the one
people out in the fields doing that much.
Well, and the one that I joke about all the time is like, and I think I first made this joke like 5 years ago, and then it's become like a common meme. But, you know, the people that are constantly protesting slavery on the internet are doing so on a phone made by children in China for like 4 cents a day. It's like, yeah, you know, you kind of you can't really start on any platform of
causes, and you can't.
Yeah, you can't really start on any platform of social justice using a smartphone of any kind.
That's a good Twitter right there.
Yeah.
And yet I would say I'm all about people speaking up but you can't also be the same cancel culture either. So don't speak up and have the right to go after and choose a cause, but also understand that there's 5,000 other causes not being talked about. And also, are you oversaturating one cause and losing out and being drawn to a different, missing something else going on? And what other, you know, we're all hypocrites. We can't help it. In different forms, we're going to be hypocrites. And so, of course, speak up and cause to bring awareness. I'm all for it. But to judge people and cancel people and hate people so fast for other things is quite hypocritical.
Well, I think too, like one of the ways I get criticized a lot of the many is I hate when any of these causes get too narrow, you know, and Terry Crews has gotten a lot of heat for this recently, but he's like, you know, we have to be careful that Black Lives Matter doesn't turn into only Black Lives Matter, and that we start to ignore everyone else and treat everyone else like shit in this path of righteousness, which is a very sort of traditional Christian messaging. I said the same thing roughly 2 years ago, but I'm a gregarious comedian who likes to be extreme in my points. And it's amazing how much pushback that gets when, you know, you're saying like, yes, we do need to be aware of this marginalized group and we do need to try to make sure that everyone gets brought along together. But you don't necessarily you don't always have to condemn one group to elevate another. And I think we're really bad at that in America, where we feel like we can only have one cause at a time. And you even saw that when the BLM thing started happening, where people were like, I don't even want to see y'all motherfuckers at brunch. Like, it's either Black Lives Matter on your timeline or shut the fuck up. And I was like, all right, I'll just shut the fuck up because I also I was like, I've also been told plenty of times that this face has no business talking about anything Black Lives related. So which is it? Like, do you want help or do you want me to get out of the way? Or what is the right answer? And the reality is, it's like you'll get a different answer every different person you talk to. So there's really not necessarily an organized, there's nothing organized about these things at all, in the sense that everyone has their different agenda. Everyone has a different idea of what the right solutions are. And to me, any solution that doesn't include everybody is obviously just the pendulum swinging one way to the next. It's like when slavery ended and went right back into other kinds of, indentured servitude. It's like, did we learn our lesson or did we just change the workforce, right?
And that's that fear, is history just always going to repeat itself and evolve into a different form? And or are we going to actually change? And I think what you're saying is how a lot of people feel. And people don't feel, they feel that way. A lot of people feel this way, and yet now are in fear of speaking about it.
Sure. Yeah,
about any confusion or
I
any agreement or disagreement.
yeah,
And that's where I would say that sensitivity is getting.
yeah, and I think one of the things that like a lot of people complain about, and they talk like one of the popular things that's working even through legislation right now is like bills on reparations, and there's essentially some of the rhetoric and some of the legislation I've read around it has been like, well, there was no participation in the creation of wealth in this country, and so that needs to be rectified. It's like I get that on a fundamental level, but anybody who's ever worked for anyone or any company doesn't necessarily participate in the equity it creates. And so like everyone at Amazon, you could argue everyone that works in a fucking warehouse at Amazon deserves some sort of reparations for building the platform and the industry that is Amazon, but that's not the agreement. And that's the unfortunate thing about the way companies work, is that there are owners and there are workers. And you like, just because Amazon becomes a $500 billion company or whatever, God knows what it's valued at, it doesn't mean everybody gets to participate in that equally. It's unfortunate, but it's the way economies around the world have worked forever. It's the way it was for like kings back in the old days when we had kings and queens. It wasn't like they were like, all right, well, just so you guys know, everybody's going to get an equal share of the gold. And then next thing you know, like everybody gets fucking murdered. It's like there's not throughout history. Like if you think that's the right thing to do, that might be the case, but throughout history, that's never been the way it's worked anywhere ever. And so like to try to go through history and try to rectify that, it's like, well, how far back are you going to go? Like, the Roman Empire, there were workers that built that. In Egypt, there were workers that built that.
Right.
Like, you don't see like Jews showing up in Egypt going, yo, I get this much of the fucking pyramid. My people built it. I get a room in the corner. Take out the sarcophagus. That's my fucking room. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, you can't. By the way, if you start doing that throughout history,
they get a free trip to Israel now. You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, you could, that becomes a very slippery slope when you try to make up for the mistakes of the past, because it's like, first of all, how do you decide who was affected? How do you decide who gets what? And then the unfortunate, crazy reality is that there would be a lot of black people that wouldn't get to participate because their ancestors were immigrants after slavery, so they wouldn't get reparations, and that wouldn't sit right with people. And then whether you like it or not, there are probably white peoples whose ancestors were slaves, and then there would be white people getting reparation checks as well if we're going to 23andMe it. And then people wouldn't be
have a joke about 23andMe. That's so good.
Yeah, it's like, people wouldn't necessarily like that either. So it's like, you got to, that's the problem with those kinds of things, is that, the doing the right thing politically is often wrapped in a lot of criteria and exceptions that people don't openly talk about until they come up. And then when they start to come up, you realize there's a lot of flaws in what this plan is supposed to be and who it's supposed to help.
Amen.
Speaking of,
that's well said. The past. That's interesting. Yeah.
Speaking of cancel culture, I think I told you this. I was shocked, and I don't know if I followed up with you afterwards, but I was expecting you to get a shit ton of outrage for doing your Instagram video about disassembling and reassembling a handgun. Which I was like, first of all, I was like, it's always badass to see people do that. And then to see like a woman do it, who's like a photographer, and the rest of your profile is like, this is photography. This is me traveling. These are my roles I've done on television and stuff. And then it's like, here's, by the way, I fully know how to take apart and put back together a handgun. And I'm very fucking ready for whatever the moment calls for.
I gotta say, it worked way better than sending a nude.
Did it?
I think I was, I'm very careful. I guess that's where I think a lot of us are at, where we, I have at our fingertips any way to speak up and become an advocate or show what we stand for or don't. And either way, it's like every choice you make, where I say, you got to look at Instagram or all your social platforms as an alibi or incriminating evidence. It is both. And you should have that awareness every time you say one sentence, send one picture. I learned that lesson in 7th grade when I sent a bathing suit picture to my boyfriend at the time, and a girlfriend told everyone, and I was mortified. And it was a bathing suit shot. And let me tell you,
that
I learned
bitch.
a lesson. You know, she's still a best friend, unfortunately. No.
Did I lose you? Oh, there you go.
My quick, bring in is I'm back. Is that I learned, okay, and I've never sent a nude to someone, and I'm not judging anyone who has, no problem. But something for me thought, I maybe shouldn't do this, even if I trust this person to death, because you've learned, no matter how much you think you know.
Are you there?
I'm lost.
Oh, there you go.
Now
you're back. Yeah, it's weird.
So
I was gonna say we
gun
don't
assembly. No.
Yeah. That's okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you've been having. Have you been having Wi-Fi issues over where you're at?
It hasn't shown it.
No, I think you are now. Yeah.
Connect fully with you, so I guess talking slowly.
Yeah, sometimes it helps.
Stay,
I guess.
Computer, work for us. We believe in you.
I know. Well, anytime you're saying anything,
when you talk to it,
it's one of those things like, oh no, the algorithm has caught on to the fact that we're saying unpopular things. But you were saying about the gun video.
Guns.
Yeah. Well, you said it
so
worked
what I
better
bring in and tie into is, of course, I work better than a titty sending photo. No, I mean, I had a ton of people, surprisingly, pretty positive about it. Some were like, "Oh, that scares me," or something. But a big part of why I wanted to disassemble and reassemble was to show, yes, a side that it is just pieces, and there is power to it, but it is the hand behind it. And unfortunately, it's done a lot of harm, but it's also done a lot of good. And that's that debate, and we could debate for a while on it. But I decided to post something really because I think it just is cool to even show a disassembly who is even seen. And that's that point you said with that human experiment. I mean, when have they even held close to a gun? So, of course, people who are less, I think education is power, and in a positive form. And even just to educate on something you don't like is important. And if you disagree with something, just try to go and find education on that platform. So if I can show a bit of the behind, I'm not in any way a weapons expert at all. I just happen to date the right military guys sometimes. I'm kidding. But
no, but I mean, I think the thing that's cool about that is you are showing what a simple machine a handgun or any gun really is. I mean, they're very simple machines. And I think, somehow I do think it helps with that fear aspect for a lot of people. Did you get any feedback like that where people were like, wow, I didn't really know that these were such simple machines, and I'm less intimidated at the idea of owning a gun or using a gun? Did anybody respond like that? Oh, we lost Laura again.
Yes,
she's been murdered.
I think I went back. I bet it was close a couple times. Am I back?
Yeah, I think so.
Testing.
Sometimes it helps to just move your mouse around while you're talking to keep your computer from trying to go to sleep.
Should I refresh?
No, you're good. Don't refresh. It'll kick you out of the room and you'll have to log back in. But sometimes it just helps to keep your computer awake and moving and stuff while you're streaming, I guess.
Learn all the tricks to the trade.
I mean, it's still, technology is very
gun.
Yeah. No, but
I laughed and just had a lot of men who enjoyed, I think, the video. At least the followers, and that's something I think I did a video before I put the gun out there, and that was important. I prefaced a bit of a talk right beforehand, and then I had a lot of positive. I was surprised with it not being a lot of negative backlash. That girl who had the freak out on 100 humans wrote me on the gun video, and she wasn't negative. She was just pretty much said, "Don't mess with Laura," and I was like, "That's right, that's fucking right."
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I
but
also like to me, like, and I think I told you, I think I might have mentioned this to you when I was messaging back and forth about the gun video, because I was just like, oh yes, this is gonna be good, to see how
yeah,
people respond to this. But my reaction to like women having having guns, owning guns, being trained with guns is like, that's the ultimate cure to the Me Too movement. If more women openly carried, and particularly in California, were allowed to conceal carry weapons, the assaults and rapes and shit like that would plummet. I'm one of those guys, and I think Steven Crowder has said this a bunch, where it's like, I wish every sexual assault ended in a gun fatality, meaning like, I wish every guy that attempted to have his way with a woman against her will got fucking shot in the head. That would end that stuff pretty quickly. And it's so weird to me that that's
interesting.
considered a controversial take.
Right, right, and anything on the form of deterrence. I think we said if fucking pedophiles were burned in front of everyone, maybe there'd be less of them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not about the death penalty, but deterrence is an interesting thing. And what do we get away with in this world right now? And what is imbalance in the justice system? And yeah, it's an interesting thought about executing or I worked in prisons and I worked with murderers and people who've probably done some terrible things. And I believe in people can change and find it's a restorative justice program, restoration and change. But there's also those same people in prison who just get just as angry at hearing stories of victims of sexual assault, of and many different forms of pedophilia and interfamilial molestation. And that happens, unfortunately, to men and women.
Yeah.
And so there is that aspect to the sexual awareness that I'm on a journey to get better and learning and having more education to give to other people so they don't have to go down certain paths that some of us women have gone through. And I think I've wondered that, and I've thought having a gun would help in certain situations. And I think it could, but who's also willing to pull the trigger? And, or, the power of the mind is a tricky thing. So, but yeah, walking from my car to my house late at night in a parking lot, hell yeah, I feel fucking safer if I had a gun in my purse than if I'm walking with a key between my fingers.
Right.
What's that gonna do?
Yeah, it's got to be a little bit more confident, but it's like any tool, it's not a catch-all, right? Like, there's not every situation, it's not going to stop every situation, it's not going to prevent everything from happening. And there are those instances where it's like people have guns in their home for protection, and then it ends up being their own demise, right? You hear those statistics about having a gun in the home, it's X number of times more likely to be used on you in a case of a home invasion. So people have a lot of
right.
You can kind of argue the statistics either way, and you can argue what's better, what's worse, but to me, it's like, whatever.
But hey, I feel better having it.
Yes. And that's the thing, is like, I think whatever makes people feel safer and whatever makes people feel more at peace is the right thing for them. So, again, like, being
and I have a very liberal roommate who likes me having it.
Who likes you having
Sorry.
it? Or doesn't like you having it?
Yeah, I mean, she actually does, and she doesn't. And I'm going to not tell anyone exactly where it is. It should be locked or easily. There's a lot of things to it, but she did say she feels safer because I have it. And I've always been that friend to people, the very security-oriented type who can. And like you, I'm always looking for situations and like to have myself readily available. If this, then what, in my head. So I guess that's a thing of mine.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. Like, again, whatever makes people feel safe and secure, especially in their own homes, because that's the thing that bothers me the most when everybody talks about, or anybody talks about, restricting the Second Amendment or restricting people's rights. It's like, you are not at liberty to say what makes someone else safe in their own home and what doesn't. And to me, personal freedom is letting people decide. Like, some people feel fine with a baseball bat. Some people want an AK-47.
Right.
They should have the freedom to decide what it is. And I'll tell you this, like, when I first moved to Los Angeles, my landlord was a prosecutor. And that motherfucker, like, I kept getting their mail because they had bought another house. Like, they had a starter home, and then they bought a bigger house when they started to have kids. And then I ended up renting their starter home when they moved. I kept getting their packages after the dude moved out, and
Right.
he was getting, like, he had enough fucking ammunition to film the next Rambo coming in just the first few months I lived there. And so this,
You'd
and I
be
remember,
getting ammo delivered to your house?
yes, and I remember asking him, I was like, "Hey man, like, like, what are you, a hunter or something?" He goes, "Nah, dude, I'm a," and I didn't even know what he did until we had this conversation,
Oh,
because
great.
he was such like an Orange County dude, like big truck,
Yeah.
sleeve tattoos. I assumed he was like a fucking surfer or some shit. And he goes, "No, I'm actually a criminal prosecutor." And he goes, "I have to have all this shit in my house in case anybody I prosecute or anybody they care about or anybody
Fuck.
that thinks that I'm the
Yeah.
reason they're in jail decides to try to come find my family. I am ready
Oh,
for them." And I was like,
and
"God
that's so
damn, dude."
sad because
Yeah,
that shit just happened with that judge. You
I
know,
know.
that's
Isn't that
it's
wild? Yeah, we're talking about this, and that's
not, I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah, and I don't know where. I think he and his family left California. I'd love to. I got to text him and find out where he's at, and because they were very nice
yeah,
people. But
yeah.
yeah, I remember reading that story and be like, man, if that was my old landlord, that would have been a whole different fucking scenario. I would love for them to, like, I would have loved for that to be the scenario where they send fucking Hillary and the squad send somebody to that dude's house. That shit ain't gonna go the way you plan.
Destroy them. I mean, and those are some stories that are so badass that aren't covered on the media. You know, the one who an open gunman comes in and another person shoots the person. And
Yeah.
I was in college in Texas and had my criminal justice classes, and I felt a lot fucking safer going to my university classes with someone next to me who had a gun, and he was able to carry his gun in our class, and that was pretty interesting. And I worked with cops at a point, and I've been on all spectrums, and I definitely think I like where you say where it's like no one understands each other's lives. What your background, and maybe you tell it. And for us to make such preconceived notions or judgments on people so quickly, and also classifying everyone into certain places is so dangerous. And it's the individual rights, and I think that's what's interesting about guns. People don't know what someone's been through and why they might want a gun or not want a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't necessarily, I don't judge someone who doesn't want a gun. And for someone who wouldn't want to watch me disassemble a gun, that's why I make a video right beforehand so that's not a trigger, pun intended, to them and what they
Right.
to what they might have gone through.
Yeah.
And so I get it. And we're such a triggerable nation right now. Everything triggers us.
Yeah.
And that's something we could talk about is we're such a reactive culture now, and we have to stop being so reactive in forms and learn how to be a stronger constitution. Another pun.
Well, yeah,
Because
I think
it's just important to.
yeah, people just need to be able to understand that, like, it's okay that not everybody thinks like you. I don't understand when people became so
Yes,
entitled to their own righteousness, but it's like, yeah, everyone doesn't have to agree with you. And by the way, if everyone doesn't agree with you, it doesn't mean it's the end of the fucking world. Like, you have to, it's almost like,
exactly.
you know what's weird? It's almost like the younger generation. And I made this comment and got called an old man on Twitter a couple days ago, but I was like, man, this new generation is like the least funny, least interesting fucking people I've ever met. And I feel like a lot of it is because they have not been forced into social situations that are uncomfortable. And, like, that is the only way for people to grow. That is the only way for people to evolve and to change their perspective. And they're not only have they not been put in those positions to be able to grow, but
Right.
now they have such a fear of environments that conflict with what they believe is right or what they believe is the way, that they have such an aggressive reaction to it when they encounter it, where they're just like, what? You don't believe the shit I believe? That fucking will not stand. And it's like, wait a minute, what country do you think you live in? Like, you think your way is the only way? And like, it's not even in big picture shit. It disseminates all the way down to the littlest things. And I deal with this as a comedian all the time, and you do comedy as well, where I'll make a joke, and the way that someone interprets the joke and what they think it says about what they think, I'll have somebody reply to me 70 fucking times arguing a point that they think that the joke makes, that the joke never intended to make. Like, I made a joke about Nicki Minaj. I said she's pregnant, which means officially every part of her body now has been injected with something, which is fucking hilarious. And rather than anybody commenting on that I'm making fun of plastic surgery or whatever, the conversation became like, why is a white man criticizing black women's bodies? And it's like, that's not the bit at all. Like, that's not the conversation at all. And by the way,
and then to me, I'm like, why are you looking at his skin and her skin?
Right. Like, well,
and it matter.
Yeah, this isn't a racial point at all. If anything,
we're making such a
right.
This is like, a racial point.
And also, you know, when did body positivity come to don't make fun of somebody who has $1 million of plastic surgery? It's like, well, are we really body positive? Or are we telling people that you can just fix how fucked up you look if you have enough money? So it's amazing to me that people believe that there's not two sides to even an argument as benign as what is really body positivity. Like, is body positivity accepting people as they are, or is it not criticizing people who are shallow and fucking facetious and materialistic? So it's like, you know, you can't say that you support something and then condemn anyone who condemns problematic aspects of what you're talking about either. It's like, it's so crazy. It would be like, I mean, there's a million analogies I could draw to it, but it's just wild to me that that they just have these such sort of like blinder point of view about something, where they get so locked in on one aspect of a topic that they can't even fathom somebody looking at it from a different angle that might even fucking agree with them. They just agree with different parts of it. So it's almost like it's either you're all with me or you're not with me at all. And that very black and white mentality, no pun intended, is more divisive than people working together to find out what they agree on and coming up with a solution, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, it's a scary thing to see in a lot of us, I think. I mean, I had a bar owner yesterday just saying he's done with sheeple, and he was just ready to have it, because I think the generation under was probably 21 years, you know, whatever it was he was just having a hard time because of, I think, the sensitivities, all these things. It's making businesses hard to move on. I mean, I found it really shocking that there's business owners of all race, all backgrounds, who have worked their asses off to try to survive, even just in California and Texas, whatever state. And I can agree that there's discrimination but apparently I can't, because I'm white, and how can I understand? But in the same sense, there's other people who are different races than Black, who are dealing with struggling business, trying to keep it going, and their businesses are told not to support, are told not to be supported. Because another one, and that's that same separatist idea that, how about let's support all businesses, all people,
right?
But this is the whole thing where we're all too afraid. And I'm not saying all lives matter, because that's apparently the two separatist thing, where it's like, you don't get the problem if you're saying that, and if you're saying Black Lives Matters, people feel like they don't think other people's lives matter.
Well, yeah, they don't feel included in that solution.
And so it's dividing everyone.
Yeah.
And this divisiveness is, how is it truly going to, I agree, help? And we can acknowledge the past. But I say the past is only meant to look at for wisdom. Not for anger, for animosity, for resentment, for shame, for guilt. We all love to do that for our own selves enough. Like, I look at all my past mistakes, and now I love your podcast because it's saying, let's fucking take the past, take our stories, and fucking laugh about them. Because another quote, probably not Thomas Edison, but if you can't laugh about it, you're not over it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And that's why I love doing this show. And that's why I like and try to get different people on with different backgrounds and experiences, because not only do I think like every dark thing can be made funny, but it's more or less just a sort of commentary on the way, like how we interpret things as a choice. Like you are allowed to, I don't know who this quote belongs to,
That's good.
but people say this all the time, but it's like life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it, right? And so, the thing that blows my mind is when people confront comedy.
I hate it. It froze right on your quote. It
Oh,
froze.
did it?
It
Oh,
froze on
okay.
the quote. Do
No,
it again.
No, I'll say it again. It says life is only
It did.
10%.
It was so like revved me up.
Oh, no. The quote is life is only 10% what happens to you. The other 90% is how you react to it. Did you get it that time? Yeah.
People need to
So
hear that again. People need to hear it again. No, I know. It's great.
Yeah. So, and that's so true. It's like how you react to things is a choice. And not only that, but you can choose to not take it so seriously, or you can choose to make jokes about it or whatever. And that choice, like all choice, is the freedom of the individual to make. And, comedy and art, I feel like this podcast, and part of the reason why I'm trying to invest a lot more time and energy into it is because I think, it's more necessary now than it's ever been before to have shows that literally give people an opportunity to say, here's some horrible shit that happened to me and here's what I'm doing with it. Like, art,
yes.
like sometimes people are not just putting it into art and comedy and film, but they're putting it into a business, or they're putting it into getting in shape, or they're putting it into their own nutrition, or they're putting it into their family. And those things are interesting to me. And that to me is like, that's how you win this sort of culture war that we're in right now, is by showing people that, life doesn't have to be 90% of what is happening to you that you can't control. If you can take control of your life by choosing how you let it affect you. And we got to stop this shit of telling people what is and isn't okay about what they choose to do with how they feel about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to stop bullying people into those things. And I love that. And I think that's a big reason I wanted to jump on. I've been from some interesting experiences and backgrounds that have shifted me into that platform of, darkness into light, and how you should. I am a huge advocate of the phoenix, from ashes. How do you rise? And if you don't take suffering and growth, like uncomfortability and suffering are necessary parts of life. And I think when people can talk about their things, as you can get people to share their stories, people will feel less alone in their journey, and maybe less shameful and full of guilt, and can laugh about it a little bit, learn from it, use it, and fucking go with it. Because if you let that shit eat you alive, or you go against people because of it, I mean, you're not making the world go round. You're just making it harder on yourself and for others. So I like what you're doing.
Well, thank you, and thanks for being a part of it. I definitely, I think it's been a good one so far. Before we go, since we're on the topic of dark shit that people have made the best of, or
I
done
know,
something
gotta
with,
leave on the good one.
You got to have a story for us of something that is there a moment in your mind of something that on the surface might have seemed like a really dark experience that led to really great things for you, or that pushed you in a direction in your life or in your work as an artist, that maybe when it was happening, or when you were going through it, you were like, this is fucking horrible, this is the worst, and then later on you found out maybe led to some good stuff.
Absolutely.
Give us your trauma. Put your trauma into the podcast.
No.
Yeah.
That's where, like the cut take when it starts is when I go, "Nah."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Give me the trailer.
I mean, okay,
I want to eventually
trailer. Laura
like a
Rishell,
trailer.
14.
Eventually I want to have a trailer for the show that is just like people being like, and that was the best part about being molested as a child. Like I want to take sound bites of like the worst parts of people's stories and then just cut all that together. And then people be like, what the fuck is this show? It's not funny. You can't make jokes about that, and just infuriate people by just giving them like this snippet of the part. And then it's just us like somebody
Look,
was like,
you got my funny vein coming
yeah,
out.
people
Yeah.
like, yeah, my mother was murdered in front of me as a child, and I'm just like, ah.
Well, there is something like that.
Okay. Oh yeah, no. Oh yeah, no. You told me.
Ah!
No, yeah. I'll cut the laughter in at the most inappropriate time. No, I think
Well,
you
people are
kind of
cutting videos and making their own,
you kind of alluded to this a little bit. I think we talked about it back and forth on social media when we were first talking about you doing the show, and then you alluded to it a little bit in your email. You do have a story you were kind of telling me about, right?
Yes, and I'm like, it's been on TV enough to where I'm like, am I just, beating a dead horse? Is it, it's been told enough, but not really, and not from my perspective much. I'm still starting to open up more about it. But yeah, my uncle became a good old murderer. And so
that old chestnut.
By that, I mean, that old thing. I said a joke I've actually wanted to say before is, I'm pretty lucky. I haven't been molested by my uncle. He was just a murderer, So he didn't touch me, from my memory, but
my favorite joke about my favorite joke about molestation, since we're on the subject, is my friend Sean Rouse, who's a deceased comedian, and he said he's like, I was an altar boy, but my priest didn't touch me, didn't even look at me, which hurts worse when you really think about it. It's like the being neglected and ignored is more damaging than being molested. I was like, oh God, he was so
well. That's rest
Sean.
in peace. That's great.
Yeah, he was so. Wow. If everybody's watching this and doesn't know who Sean Rouse was, he was the comic that opened for Dave Attell the night I decided I was going to be a stand-up comedian in 2006, and I don't want to continue the story too long because you're on yours, but he had an album, I think in 2008 or whatever, maybe even earlier than that, called Spilled Milk. And he's an incredibly dark, amazing comedian. This show is really in the spirit of the kind of comedy that he did. And he was a guy very sick, lived, I think, a long time past when he was supposed to. He had very bad, debilitating rheumatoid arthritis and a lot of other health complications, passed away a few years ago. But anybody who's a fan of dark comedy has to check out Sean Rouse, who has some of the best dark jokes on that album that you'll ever hear in your life. But not any stories about murderous uncles, and that's what I want to hear about that. Oh, apparently he murdered your internet connection as we're speaking. Oh, we lost Laura. Do we have to let her back in? There you go. Oh, now you're good. Now you're in high res for a second.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, you looked like you were live streaming from MS Paint for most of this episode.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just internet, probably shitty internet connection. I don't know.
Dang it. I'll have to get better. I bet maybe if I even did on my phone next time, it could have been. You wonder.
Yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes it works better on phones. Who knows? I mean, I guess we can always check it. We'll do it next time. But and we'll definitely have you back again. It's been fun.
I like that chat out. That was cool to hear from that joke with him. And
yeah. No, he's great. Was great.
Important to study. Was great.
Yeah.
Molestation jokes. You gotta be. I mean, that's someone like when you can make a good one like that. It's like you can make even the most cynical person in the crowd who was deeply molested all of a sudden laugh, and you're like, I won.
Yeah. Well, I remember, and I saw him live before I had ever even heard of him or heard any of his work. And so to be sitting in an audience and hear a guy drop shit like that when you're not expecting it, I don't know if I've ever laughed harder in my life than when I first. And
Wow.
he had such a very sort of Southern gentlemanly way of delivering just the most fucked up material that, it was
Oh,
impossible
so
not to
good. Just
laugh at it.
work.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
he
just
was
work.
legendarily good. There's a great
Mm.
video of him. There's a great video of him on the internet. If you Google Sean Rouse, I think the first video you'll find is a video of him, I think at a Doug Stanhope show with a comic named Junior Stopka. And he's Junior is using Sean was a very little guy. Junior is using him like a ventriloquist dummy, and he's using him like a Bill Burr ventriloquist dummy. So he's literally
Right.
it's Junior doing Bill Burr, but
I'm
using
like, have I
Sean
seen
but using
Oh,
Sean Rouse as the ventriloquist dummy. It's the funniest fucking thing. If you know Bill Burr, it's the funniest shit
yeah, it's
you'll
so
ever
clever.
see in your life. It's so
It's
so
so
hilarious.
clever.
But I keep talking about things that aren't your story. But dive into
Pish posh, women and their stories. Get over it.
it.
I think that was something I wrote you. I'm here to make balls be turned into vaginas.
Yes.
Sensitivity take a pounding. But really it's because I'm the youngest of 4 girls, and you couldn't be very sensitive when you're the youngest of 4 girls, because especially with some of the versions of my sisters, God love them, but tough. And now you look back and you're like, I guess I'd rather have that, as you say, than the generation you feel like too accustomed to not being uncomfortable and going through some shit. So it acclimated me for maybe being someone who took these dark stories and turned them into good opportunities or laughter. And I will say that's always been my coping mechanism. I could have been a drug addict, but instead I chose humor. And by that, it was like, even started with divorce, and my parents were divorced, and I'm 14, and that's like the end of your world as you know it in forms. But for me, I was like, this will be good for us, and became the funny one at that point to make my mom laugh as much as I could, because that was better than hearing her cry all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think I started to realize the power of laughter and the medicine it does for the heart. And I'd make all sorts of jokes and make a fool of myself and do I became her Jim Carrey, as she would call it, during that really painful time for our family and losing everything.
Yeah.
And that moved into being very close to her, us moving to try to start. We lost everything. Like, stock market crash 2008, the family, so lost the home and the divorce and animals, whatever it may be. And it moves into being very close to my mom and getting a call that our Aunt Tony fell off a cliff. And this is after dealing with, I have my sister, I can say was, because she's now been sober for a year now. And
that's good.
Which is good. When it was, she says she hates it, and I keep using 10 years. But you did, Katie. You put us through 10 years of it. It's fucking awful. Like 10 years of dealing with an addict sister. I can try and stop beating around the bush. Anyone who's been around anyone who's an addict, it fucking sucks. You love them, and it's the worst. It's just the worst. And
the alternative, it's like, you're like, well, it's been a year, I can say she's officially been clean. That's good, because the alternative is they don't ever get there, and then they pass away, like my brother did back in May. So, that is and again, like, I was making jokes like 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes after my mom and I got the call that he had passed away. And it's just like, that's just becomes your coping mechanism. You just,
why do you think military men do it? Why I bonded with people. I was in college when my uncle became national news for being a murderer, for killing my 2 aunts and almost my mother. So there's the goose egg. And what I realized for that was, there's, sensitivities are great and you can try to talk to someone about it, but I got along best with people who just made a joke or two and understand the deep and the level of grief you could go through. But I think I find a correlation of why comedians like us, like that you found something, because I think if you deal with humor well, you've probably dealt with some grief pretty well too. That's just my theory.
Most of them have to in some way or another. And I think the comedy that comes from people who haven't really experienced anything traumatic is usually pretty fucking lame. It's pretty
Yeah,
it's
it just
pretty
does.
boring.
It's pretty boring. And that's where I'm like, I think my comedy wasn't that great because I was holding back from maybe the more fucked up shit where, say, I want to make a molestation to killer uncle joke. And then people will be like, wait, is that true? Or, I mean, there's plenty of things to it. But it's brought me to, yeah, I mean, humor is a great mechanism for coping. Laughter is a great medicine. And all the dark tragedies are shame stories. I mean, okay, I'll give you a better one than even my killer uncle. It's not
Well,
better,
hold on.
but
That's a pretty good one by itself. And you said something there a minute ago that I don't want to skip over. You said
okay.
he killed two of your aunts? Like, so are these
So
two of his wives or his wife and his wife's sister? Because you gotta really like to be like, I
yeah,
can't just kill my wife. I gotta kill her fucking
I
sister
know,
too. What kind
right,
of a
right.
wife is that?
No, you were right the first time I think you gave, and people, since we won't keep this going too long, can look up the case or see another version of. I mean, it's plenty of Googleable. I'm actually flying out in another couple weeks to, I think, do another show for it because people apparently like to know. They love stories. I realize Americans, especially when it's like a great-looking man, wealthy, leader in the church, turned out to be a serial killer.
Yeah,
Whoa, what
I mean,
happened?
you could have stopped at leader in the church. I would have been like, here's where the story turns, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, he was good about seeming like a great Christian man for sure. I knew him since I was born. He was an uncle by marriage, by marrying my Aunt Lynn. That
Okay.
was the first wife. And in 1996, don't quote me on it. My mom's the date queen. I'm like, I was born in 94. Was it 95 when she died? She was killed in the 90s. All of a sudden, my brain had a fart right then, and I was like, "What the fuck was it? 95?" By getting crushed by a vehicle and him being the only one there. Let's fast forward to the case being closed in 6 days, and it ruled an accident, and him getting insurance money for it. And then 2012 comes along. He's happily remarried, still all around our family.
Well,
The loving.
let's not speculate on the happy part just yet.
True. She was probably miserable
Presumably
most of the
happily, yeah.
marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, the happy marriage, great picture. You have a daughter. They had a daughter. And with the second wife. And 2012, she fell off a cliff.
Nice.
So, yeah, good old Uncle Harold just loved to kill his wives for money. That was
Yeah,
his job. Some
well,
people choose banker, financer,
it is.
entrepreneur.
I mean, it is,
It was a good business.
isn't it funny though? Because now I'm just picturing this guy as like a church leader being like, listen, divorce is never the answer. There are alternatives that are far more profitable than just leaving a bitch, if you know what I mean. Send her to the Lord, cash in. And there are dudes that would be in the congregation like, this guy makes sense. Being a pass a collection plate, he is speaking truth.
Yeah,
He's like, I'm
yeah.
not.
I
Yeah,
I now am like an advocate for like where I'm like, where's the line with divorce? Because he wasn't a cheater, and he obviously knew that, and he did go for Christian women. That was it. Like my aunts were very devout Christian wives, so that is the point exactly. It was, they're not going to divorce me. They're
and
not going to
I
divorce.
can't cheat on him, so murder is the only option.
Murder is what she wrote.
Wow, that's
And I think he just, he
that's
didn't want to work.
hilarious. I mean, the hilarious idea that you're so committed to the sanctity of marriage that you'd rather murder your wife than divorce her is pretty fucking funny.
That is funny. And I know that's not Harold because he was just sick and wanted money and found a good victims of it. But because he
Yeah.
went for my mom next. My mom was the next victim, and
Oh.
and he realized he didn't have to get his money anymore. He just had to find the right insurance man who could do all three of these women's policies and kill them.
This reminds me of that documentary that was on Netflix about the guy who was You know what I'm talking about? Was tried for the murder of his
I
wife.
stopped watching these when my own life became
I'm
one. So
sure.
I
Yeah.
just
No,
stopped tuning
it was
in.
no. It's called The Staircase. Did you ever watch it?
Uh-uh.
Yeah. It's. I for a second when you started explaining this, I was like, oh my god, is her uncle the dude from The Staircase? No, it's a different story. But
Well, y- y- Harold's has been on 48 Hours. This has been on People Magazine, 48 Hours, Dateline, Discovery Channel. It's been on every single possible crime show, pretty much at this point.
yeah.
But apparently not Netflix. So we fucked up. We got the wrong streaming
Yeah.
platform. I won't do another murder show unless you pitch me the Netflix and Hulu deal.
It's got to be the streaming deal, right?
Exactly.
I was gonna say, has it affected your outlook on marriage? Are you thinking like this is something that's probably not for me?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was a very, that was my next story, was going to be the story about the loss of my virginity, because I was a virgin until 22. And let's say it wasn't because I'm a psycho and ugly. All right. I did everything under the sun.
Yeah,
Another
first of
stupid
all,
Christian.
let's just agree. Even if you were a psycho and you were ugly, it wouldn't
I could
fucking
have been
matter.
fucked.
It
It
wouldn't
wouldn't
matter.
matter.
It doesn't matter. Like literally, there is like
Women can lose their virginity in a day, just like that. It's
there
simple.
is literally like a woman right now in a grocery store with no arms and no legs, like using her chin to push her fucking electric wheelchair. And there's a dude 2 aisles over who's like, I'd fuck her. Definitely. And if she has any kind, he's like, yo, if she got no arms and no legs, she got to have them government benefits coming in. She probably got a settlement, some disability.
And
Like
then he probably tried to.
there's a
There's a lot of
dude.
shit about disabilities and women getting married and then them killing them too, I think.
Yeah,
And
of
like,
course. Like, dude, there's definitely a guy who looks at a chick like that and starts doing the math. Like, oh, maybe what kind of poisonous chemical did she get from like eating a candy as a child? I bet she's got billions. Like, he's looking at a chick with no arms and no legs and be like, this legless, armless
that's
woman
the
is
real
gonna.
predators out there. That's
Yeah,
the
they're
real.
like, she might have no arms, but she gonna carry me to the life I always wanted.
I mean, that's what my uncle did. He went on Christian Mingle to find his second wife.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, perfect. A woman who still probably wants to have kids. She's getting older, so she needs a stable. This is perfect. I'll match this profile. Done deal. She had oil dividends, and she was a doctor. The second wife.
That's funny.
She was rich.
I wonder what his Christian Mingle profile said. I'm a fan of long walks on the beach that one of us may or may not ever come back from.
I love hiking.
Yeah.
And I'm really good at fixing cars.
Yeah, I like hiking. Yeah, I'm a big fan of hiking and what do they call it? And base jumping. Sometimes without a parachute. Sometimes without a partner. You first.
You first. Till death do us part. It is eerie. They've cut that home video of him with his wives. Like, I know in one of the shows, like, until him repeating with her, till death do us part, or whatever. You're like,
oh god.
Yeah, because he knew what he was gonna do.
I'm kind of glad that my family was not like a home video family, because home video footage is rarely ever cut together for a good purpose. You ever notice that? Like home video.
Like, my own home videos now are tainted on public news.
Yeah. Anytime you watch a documentary and they start showing you like what a nice boy someone was in their home videos, you're like, how many people did this guy fucking murder? It's coming, right? Like it's literally like a kid. It's like a kid in a play place, like beep boop beep. You're like, this kid fucking ate someone's asshole to death. I guarantee. And then you almost wonder, like, you ever wonder if the parents back then are like holding that old ass big VHS camcorder and they're just like, our kid's a fucking serial killer. I hope you guys know we're recording this so that when the shit goes down, we could be like, we knew, we saw, look, we were. That's why we were.
TikTok chick.
They're like,
right now is doing that. It's like weird. My sister died or went missing in the state. Can you tell by these home videos that my dad's the one who did it? Like weird shit where you're like, she's doing her own fucking story, and it's like the little girl, and everyone's tapping in to seeing the sister on the home video. They're like, those are clear signs. Because she, like, this girl who's gone missing yells, "Dad's a pedophile, get away from him," in like the home video. And you're just like, now that girl's missing.
That's terrible.
Yeah, weird shit. Good old murder stories. And then it was like, yeah, I mean, the Christianity side, you know, still a very faith-based person. I mean, I say humor got me through it, but you know, I'm a good old, here, let's just pull this right off. In the name of Jesus. But it helps me. I can put it back on. But you know, it was something that I went through on that weird moment where, you know, that was another story where like you really thought you were gonna get married and save yourself for marriage, and then you end up losing it to a douchebag one night stand that you don't somehow remember. You know, like
Yeah.
the what is
I
life? What
I would have probably done that too. I would have been like, if I were like a devout religious person, and then my religious uncle murdered his wife, and then we kind of found out he had done it before too, I would be like, yo, I'm fucking the first dude I see when I leave this church. I got to get the
It's
spirit
an
out of me.
interesting timeline because it's true. I mean, I was 18 when that all started to shift in my life. My sister's addiction journey was really, I was like co-parenting with my mom on that. And it
Yeah.
was just, I graduated, I was about to graduate college, almost got through fucking all of college without losing my virginity too. I was like, but you know, you're doing everything under the sun. Because I'm a pleaser too. So here we are. It's like, you know, give them a good appetizer without the main course. I was a good appetizer.
Oh
I
wow.
made them
Okay.
feel full. I made them feel full.
I
But
like
then again,
you know what I like for an appetizer? I like a sampler. I like a little bit of everything. Was it like
I
that? Like, because
understand.
I like the boneless wings and the rib bites and the mozzarella sticks.
I've had a joke about like putting actual sauce in your areas there, and maybe people actually enjoy it more. Like your favorite sauce.
Yeah.
I'm getting too food related.
No,
Like,
no, you're speaking my language.
put some fucking
Sauce.
barbecue sauce down there. I'd be like, I'll go to town.
Well, it depends on what kind of sauce we're talking about. Also, barbecue sauce. I
I know
mean,
it could burn shit. Barbecue.
yeah, I was like,
Buffalo is actually more my fave.
yeah,
But
buffalo
if I'm
sauce. That's
talking real
like all
sauce,
vinegar. Jesus. Yeah, I would
I
think
love that
like
we go to
I would think
killer
like a,
Uncle Virginity to sauces
yeah,
on your private.
yeah, I think an aioli would be good. It's funny. I was watching a show yesterday or
Garlic
two.
aioli.
Yeah, or have you ever accidentally gotten buffalo sauce in your private parts or jalapeno juice? Because I can tell
Haven't
you,
tried this yet.
it's the worst feeling you'll ever. Let me tell you something. If your uncle would have just cut up a jalapeno and then fingered his wife, she would have thrown herself off the cliff because it's fucking miserable. It's the worst pain
After
you
that
ever
comment, I will
experienced.
tell none of my family members to listen to this podcast.
I'm just saying. Listen,
None, because
if they've ever worked with jalapenos, they will know. Like, he speaks the truth. This man. I've made the mistake of not wearing
he
gloves and
speaks
cutting
the
up
truth. This
jalapenos,
man, yeah, and then
and then
fingering yourself.
not myself, just sexy time with anybody. But yeah, it's the
Oh,
most brutal. It's the most brutal thing
oh,
you'll
I
ever.
got one. I got one for you. Close, but I had a moment where I had my nails done. I always had acrylics, you know. And this guy wanted me to stick my finger up his asshole, and I was like, I got acrylics on like that. Well, I feel like I'm gonna be stabbing you. It was terrifying. I couldn't do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I don't know.
I think
That's what
it felt
blows
like
my.
I was killing him. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's how I feel about fake nails on women all the time. I go, well, she doesn't put those fingers anywhere
Can't,
fun.
that, and that's why I don't have my nails done now, so
Well,
I
there
can
you
finger
go.
pop each other's assholes.
Jesus Christ. Well, don't be working with any raw jalapenos. That's my advice to you. That is
That's
the best.
true.
That's
We
the
just
best
put raw
advice.
fingers in the acrylics and then just
Yeah, well,
think
I mean,
about a woman's way to get back at people. I mean, there's so many more creative things we could do to be sinister
that's
beings.
that's supposedly how hot chicken was born, right? I mean, that's the old wives' tale. I don't know if it's actually true. Um, I like to
What are you
think that
talking about?
blacks made it in a laboratory, but no, I'm kidding. No, hot chicken supposedly was a woman found out her husband was cheating on her and he loved fried chicken, and then she just made it spicy as fuck to try to destroy his asshole. Yeah, and then he was like, I love this shit. And then Nashville became a city. I don't know the exact story, but I think I'm pretty close.
Can you tell my kids one day the history of places? I'll be
Yeah,
like,
it'd be
this is
great.
how
It'll be
it's better than drunk history. And Josh Denny's like just version of how things were like created. I mean, that is true. They do drunk history. It could be like a version of invention.
well,
Funny
one of my
Take on
favorite,
it.
one of the reasons I could never be like a full blown conspiracy guy is that I'm too tempted to see what I could get to take off.
Make a joke.
Yeah, like my buddy
Yes,
Sam, my
exactly.
buddy Sam has one of the biggest conspiracy podcasts called Tinfoil Hat. And they like uncover
Ooh.
everything and they dive into everything. And I'm like, dude, I go, he's like, come on the show. And I was like, yeah, but I'm so tempted to make something up completely and then watch people assemble the reality behind what I said that was just me pulling something out of
Avengers
my ass.
assemble.
Just being like, yeah, y'all know how Roger Goodell has slaves, and people are like, yes, it was. Yeah, look, I found this article from 2004. It's like I am too tempted to poison the well with. I would be great at disinformation because that's my favorite fun
But
shit.
oh, you'd be
I would
so
just
good though.
yeah, it's it's to me that
Yeah.
it's the old what is it, the man who shot Liberty Vance when the truth
Boy Who Cried Wolf.
no it's the quote of like when the legend it becomes more entertaining or interesting than the truth, print the legend. Like that's true about media. It's true about everything. It's so to me it's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
yeah, we could talk about real
Yeah.
conspiracies or we could just make some up and see where they go. And then I would be so untrusted.
I would
I would
wouldn't
be
be smart to have you on.
yeah, no,
I
I'm
know. I
not.
know.
I'm not truth seeking at all. I would literally just be there trying to figure out like what could I get people to believe. And by the way, if you're into conspiracies, you have to know that there's probably like 30% of them that somebody is just like, let me see if I can get this thing to get legs. So that's why I always kind of take them with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Why take them? Well, that's the truth that anyone should do. In any good conspiracy thing you follow, they say, this is not the truth. Find it with yourself. Like this, I'm just putting out the information for you to follow the rabbit trail. So that's the point. But unfortunately, too many people right now are believing the first article they see is truth, or the first bit, and they don't know how to have proper discernment with information. And or they have their own design on why they would want to believe something so quickly and fly with it.
Well, that's what I love about conspiracies in general, because in a way some people are like, well, this is just people trying to capitalize on the fact that we live in a society where people will believe anything. And I go, yes, that's the beauty of that as a business model. That's saying if you fucking people will believe anything, I'm going to give you shit to believe in. I'm going to make money from it. That's not conspiracy theory. That's every religion in the history of humanity. That's exactly what it is. It's just like, oh, you guys believe this shit? Dope. Me too. Come to my place where we'll believe it together and give me your money. And they go, all right.
And yet it's also, there's validity to them as well, where then you're like, oh shit, the truth is actually fucking way crazier than the story they were giving us. And if you dig maybe into something or not, but I guess that's where people bite at it, is, or even where they love the killer uncle stories and they're like, oh fuck, we gotta run with this as much as possible because it's real. And that shit, like, I guess, happened. And so that's the interesting thing is when it is real, that's when everyone's like, oh fuck. But how to determine it? What is real?
It's a great way to put a pin in it. What is real? Who cares? Yeah, exactly. What is real? None of this has been real. No. Well, Laura, thank you. Thanks so much for coming on. Is there anything you want to plug or promote before you get out? I want to let you get on with the rest of your day. We still have a lot of day ahead of us here in California.
I guess that is a good point. I guess I should probably be getting better on a YouTube channel like you and pulling it out of the archives and getting better. It'll probably be just under my name, Laura Rishell, or all my platforms are at Joy of Laura. But I'm not one of the best on the media platforms yet, but there's stuff coming for us, we're going to get there. And I feel good about it all. So I don't know. Thanks for listening to my tangented voice as well, and just going through these fun topics, because I think they're worth following and discussing and listening to. And I think there's more people like us than we think.
I think so too. And the thing that's really cool about the internet now is that all of these different voices and, that you're getting to hear kind of more diversity and opinions and ideas and thoughts and perspectives and stuff than ever before. So I think some of that is a little overwhelming. Like, sometimes it's overwhelming in the sense of like I watch and consume a lot of this stuff, and then I just feel like after I consume it all, I'm like, well, what else do I have to add to the conversation, or what,
Yes.
what do I,
Yes.
and a
Who
lot,
am I?
yeah,
Yeah.
and part of a lot of the reason why I've like taken a lot of time off of my podcast recently is feeling that way of like, you watch all these podcasts, it's like, well, I don't want to talk about just current events a lot because that's been done to death, and there's so many people that do that. I'd much rather just have interpersonal
Right.
conversations and talk with people about them and their life and stuff, and just kind of like let it go where it goes organically, which is, to me, a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think the power of the world to move is just empathy in many forms, or hearing people's stories and positions. And if you can a bit about the background of that person, it might make you care for them a little more, to understand them a little more. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them more.
Yeah.
It just is good points of human connection. And I'm a big advocate. Be friends with people who don't agree with everything with you, and try to find all sorts of different positions and things for yourself to immerse yourself into the growth and the uncomfortability. So I'm glad that we had this discussion and hit on things, and even challenge me in forms to make some crass jokes about, a past that was painful, and yet there's some humor to be made light over the shittiness of it. And I don't think it's doing a disservice of the lives lost. I think they're gone and they're doing okay. And what we can do is try to not make fun of it, but just enjoy and make light of something that we're always made to be so heavy.
Yeah.
So heavy.
Well, and if ultimately
finger popping each other's assholes.
if you are if you are truly spiritual or religious in any sense too, then, and if you genuinely believe, this is one of the things that I always think is a good test of someone's faith, is you really will, your grief will stop at some point if you really believe that person has moved on to a better place. And so, to me, it's like
Absolutely.
at some point, if you really do put your faith in that kind of thing, you'll stop having grief over losing someone if you really do believe they're in a better place. I always like to kind of bust people's balls when they grieve too long and be like, it's time to let this shit go, Mom. If you really believe that your family members are in a better place, then you got to kind of live that way, and you got to trust that that's where they are. And because there's really nothing positive.
Subject, yeah.
Yeah, there's really nothing positive to come out of the believing the alternative, right? And that's why I think that's why people believe in anything, is because it makes them feel good. So let it make you feel good. If believing in God is your way of feeling good about people dying, then do it and commit. Don't be half-assed.
Commit.
Yeah. Get all the way in there.
The death of that person. I've had a lot of people die close to me in different forms, and I get it. You're triggered by it. There's reminders of past and memory. There's so many ways to feel the grief, and time doesn't help all wounds. I think or heal all wounds. It helps, because you're never the same after you lose a person like your brother. You'll have that little hole maybe in some forms, but you move on. You have to grow, and you're on this earth still, and they're in a different plane, possibly, hopefully, and what you want to believe. And large form, they're not suffering, no matter what, right? I guess they're not the ones. I had that big awareness, like when I lost my friend. I guess he's in pain anymore, so I need to sometimes work on that. But sometimes we think grief and suffering is like keeping their memory alive and their legacy, but we can do that in different forms. And that's a big thing. I love. We can talk for hours. I mean, I'm really intrigued with victim to offender mediation, or working through victimization, or working through events such as that. And that's something I do have a passion for. And so I think it's something that could be discussed for a while, how to deal with that sort of thing. But here we are.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like I said, if you believe in it, put your faith into it and work at it. Maybe don't believe in it so much that you're willing to send people to their death a little early. That might have been your uncle's fatal flaw. He's like, trust me, you're going to a better place. Bagadoosh.
Oh, please. That man is not a Christian. He hid in the church because he was a snake and he knew where to hide. If he thought he was a Christian in marrying people, yeah, that's a funny play. I like the idea of like the Christian who can't get a divorce and he kills, thinking it's like the virgin who doesn't have sex, but we do everything else.
Right.
I mean, and call it the difference of, well, that's that oral sex thing, or what is, and when I had sex, I was like, this is what I was fucking waiting for.
I know,
bullshit.
it's really,
this is really
it's
this
really the
is
world's most ultimate letdown when you think about it. It's just like this is
it was for me. I had built my
yeah.
world around this, purity, and I'm good. But I'm like
You're
69 is
like
way more intimate than sex
yeah,
most of the time.
yeah, exactly. You're like what when was the light supposed to shoot out of my eyes? Well, this is not good. This is so that's it. Then we just roll over and go to sleep
It's the
and
same statement where I say, as a Christian still, and I say, you can have sinful sex in marriage and you can have pure sex outside of marriage. This concept of this, I feel, paper you sign isn't and we're so just small-minded when it comes to that concept now and too religious. And so it needs to be understanding on your body, your soul, and what connects. And there can be whatever the word sin means to you. I like to say it's separation. When, bottom line, yeah, there's a lot. It's not black and white. It's just not fucking black and white. Nothing is.
so true. So true. Laura Rishell, everybody. I hope you
Full circle.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And Laura, thanks for coming. I'll have you on again. We'll talk about the victimization stuff. And
I know I enjoyed it. And that's all that matters.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully like, when all this craziness dies down, we can actually do it like in person and do a studio one and not have these technological complications.
Sure.
It's always so weird for me, like having to stream with friends that live 2 miles away or like right up the street, and we're streaming on our computers.
How's it going over there, Josh?
Yeah,
Fix
none
your
of us.
fucking internet.
Yeah, exactly. That's not my internet. It's yours. But
I know it's probably mine. I'm cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we'll do it again sometime, and it'll be I think it'll be fun, and I've enjoyed this one, and it's always good when you have it sounds weird to say. It's always better when you have a willing participant, like I just be raping podcast guests into coming on my show and be like, just come on. No, promise me you'll like it. Come on. That's so funny.
That's good. That's so fun.
All right, I'm gonna click the little end button here. Yes. End broadcast.